Everyone good to go? Yep. Okay, guys, let's have your attention. First of all, welcome to Samui Real Station 143. Hey, 143 session. Give us a hand. Okay, tonight we have a guest who's actually from Ireland, but he spent the last 20 years in Australia, living through the COVID times and other times, and he's come across other groups that are similar to ours, which you'll hear a bit about tonight. This is Dennis O'Connor. Big hand for Dennis.
Hey. Thank you very much.
Okay, and today Dennis is going to talk. He's going to talk about something that everybody probably is interested to hear about, and it's something that I think is very important, and he seems to know quite a bit about. And he's been working with these groups in Australia. He'll talk about it. But the title of his talk today is "What is this thing, common law, that we hear so much about, and how can we use it successfully, or can we use it successfully?" So I'll hand it over to Dennis. He'll do a talk, and we'll have Q&A afterwards. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you, Patrick, for inviting me to talk. And I think it's fair to say, with all the problems we're having around the world today, we need more and more strategies to be able to counteract in some way what's going on. And for me, common law is a very, very valid strategy about some small things that everybody can do to make a little bit of difference. So what I want to do first is I want to play a video, and just don't worry too much about the content of the video, but just the main thing here is the end result of the video. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that, and you got common law purists, okay? And I like to think of common law more as an umbrella term, and it takes away the confusion. And again, it's something that I'll allude to in the middle of the conversation, that a lot of this discussion is a little bit subjective. But I happen to be very, very privileged to have a fairly good relationship with one of the world leaders of common law in the town I lived in Australia. So, and I believe that his methodology is probably as close as you can get to being the most successful that we can use. But I'm going to be telling people about his story as well during the presentation. But I'll give you a bit of background about myself while we're waiting. So basically, I left Ireland when I was about 18, went to England for a little while, studied nursing in England, and then met a woman in England, went to Australia with her. She was Australian, and I fell into doing intensive care. So I was in the belly of the beast essentially for a long time. So yeah, so I did intensive care probably, and I fell into that. It wasn't something that I actually thought I would do, but I ended up being fairly good at it because I was too stupid to know that it was a very dangerous field to work in. And I would accept shifts there. So then slowly but surely you gain credibility. I got to the stage there of something called a clinical nurse consultant, which meant I was responsible for, getting in machinery, doing assessments, training junior nurses, training doctors. And at that time, I've always had this, I guess, a bit of an anti-authoritarian part of my personality, but I never really knew how bad the whole medical system was. I kind of took a break from nursing, ended up selling real estate, did things like scuba dive instructing, and then the market fell really flat, and I'll go into that as well in this presentation. And I had this massive question about what the hell happened to all my houses and my money. And I got these really ambiguous statements of, oh, well, the markets, they're just a reflection of the future. And I'm sitting there going, no, hang on a second, I lost a lot of money. Where did that go? And a really big penny drop for me was G. Edward Griffin. I'm sure most people have heard of that fella. Hands up if anybody hasn't. Okay. Again, I've got this all in PDF. And so I've put some embedded links in the PDF as well, so people can research and follow up on the information. But G. Edward Griffin, for anybody who doesn't know, wrote a couple of books. He wrote a book about cancer cures, which was quite incredible, but he also wrote a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And Jekyll Island is an island off the coast of America, and we're back in again. Welcome back to Zoom. So we'll get back to this presentation in a sec, but just to finish up that train of thought, essentially that was a meeting place for some of the richest people in the world to get the Federal Reserve Bank into America. And as a lot of people know here, that was a significant time where things started to go backwards very, very quickly with the introduction of the Federal Reserve Bank, which is a private company owned by people like the Rothschilds. But okay, now I'm going to try and navigate this computer, and we'll play this video very quickly. So just bear with me a sec if you can. Okay, so this is a woman that went to court in Australia for violating COVID rules. And there's some captions on top of this, and you can have a look at the captions. The captions aren't quite spot on, but they'll give you enough context to know what's going on. But listen to how she handles the magistrate. If it's a little bit unclear, just tell me this pause, and I'll because I've kind of heard this a few times, so I might be able to interpret it for you. But again, don't get too bogged in what's going on. It's more kind of the theme about what's happening.
Yep, I'm also on camera. Yes, I am.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, thank you. I'll just read the charge out quickly for you. So it's at Melbourne on the 13th of September 2020. Did fail to comply with the direction given to that person. That direction being to stay at home unless for essential shopping, work, exercise or caregiving purposes, having been given by a person exercising the power granted by the Chief Health Officer under Section 199 of the Public Health and Wellbeing Act. So in relation to that charge today, are you intending to plead guilty or not guilty?
So, Your Honour, I am the living woman.
Yes.
I'm the beneficiary of the trust. I do not consent to contract or joinder, and I waive the benefits on offer.
Okay, so I'll take that that statement to mean that you're intending to plead not guilty today. So thank you for that. I think, prosecutor, this circumstance, contest mentioned?
Yes, Your Honour.
Yes.
Your Honour, I've been given a copy of the letter provided by Ms. Beck to the court.
Oh, yes.
I haven't had any prior correspondence. I can't see that there's been any case conferencing in the matter, but certainly no objection to the matter going.
Yes, thank you. I think it's suitable. I'll get a date, case contest mention date. So, Ms. So the next, I'll give you a next date now. This will be the contest mention date, okay? So there's various steps that the matter has to go through before it gets to a contested hearing. So I understand that's what you're looking for eventually.
What you said here.
Be a contested hearing or some chance to address the court in relation to the charge. Today is only a mention court, so we sort of triage matters into basically matters that are going to be pleas of guilty or pleas of not guilty. So not guilty pleas need to go down a different pathway. So if you just hold on there for a second, we'll get a new court date.
So, Your Honour, are you administering my trust without my consent?
There's no administration of any trust at the moment, so we're just dealing with the matter under the Criminal Procedure Act. Okay, so that's 2009, an act in force in Victoria, and the next step will be a mention date under the Criminal Procedure Act under Section 55 of that Act. So if you take it over Section 55 of the Criminal Procedure Act, that'll be the next court date in relation to that, and that'll set out the process of what's occurring.
I do not consent to contract or joinder, and I waive the benefits on offer.
Thank you, Miss. Your matter now is booked in for the next court steps to occur. The next court date is the 7th of December. Okay, so that'll be a contest mention back online in the Melbourne Magistrates Court. Okay, so that might take between 15 minutes and half an hour, depending on what's discussed on that day. But that mention date will give you a better chance to discuss your matter further. Okay, and the submissions you wish to make. Okay, so thank you for your time today in court, and you're now excused.
Thank you for your time, Your Honour.
Now she comes back. This is what happens when she gets back.
Thank you. We'll just confirm. You're on the line there. You can see and hear us.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Your Honour, is an application to withdraw this matter.
All right. Thank you. On the prosecution application to have the charge withdrawn, charge is now struck out. Thank you. The charge has now been struck out. You may be excused.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honour.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do is we're going to cover what happened there, but we're going to start with where some of this language has come from that she was using with the magistrate. With the people who know what happened there, could she have used a better strategy, do you think? It worked for her. Could there have been a better one? The answer is yes, and I'll show you why as we go through this, okay? So as I said before, in the middle of mental health, belly of the beast, intensive care, blah, blah, blah. Left nursing for a long while, did real estate, lost a load of money. I had 4 properties in Australia, was doing fairly well. Market crashed. I was working in real estate, couldn't get paid. And that started me on the journey of finding out what the hell happened to my money. So it just threw open a big can of worms about everything, including health. When you're working in real estate, the market crashes, you don't get paid. So I did something that I didn't want to do, which was get back into nursing. So I ended up getting back into the area of mental health. That's a whole other story about what I would say now, the atrocities that are happening in the mental health system. And I saw them I think I spent about 7 or 8 years there. And my tenure there kind of got worse and worse because I kept on having arguments with psychiatrists and peers and very qualified people about not giving my patients medications. And I had, for me, what I thought was fairly good evidence that these things were harmful, but the so-called experts were insisting that these patients had these medications. That's a slight digression. So that was when the market started crashing, but in around that 2012 to 13 was when I was in real estate and it took another dive down. That's when I had to sell my properties to finance my loans. So we talked about quickly there the G. Edward Griffin, and I stumbled across cryptocurrency around that time. And cryptocurrency had, people might, I'm sure, know the Satoshi white paper. And the themes behind the Satoshi white paper were just hitting the mark on a lot of things that I felt really passionate about. So the premise and the white paper behind, yeah, we know it's got some links to the CIA and it could be DARPA code, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. It's the way I see it is it's like the internet. The internet was also invented by people who want to trap us, but we use it for our good. I feel Bitcoin is the same. But cryptocurrency threw open this whole area of these I guess these anti-authoritarian people. So I felt an alignment, being Irish and, having, excusing any English people here, I know it wasn't you guys personally, it was more banker driven, et cetera, et cetera. But having that history behind us, it really gets you thinking about the structure of the world. And then when you're dabbling around in this crypto area, this thing called common law comes up. And you go down so many rabbit holes about common law, and there's a lot of bad information out there, but then every so often you come across some absolute gold. And one fellow I came across was a fellow called Romley Stewart. He's got a channel called Justinian Deception. And for 2, 3, 4 years, the information he was throwing out was just absolutely profound. A lot of biblical stuff in there, a lot of stuff about how language went and how things were written, but I couldn't really quite get where he was getting this stuff from. And probably after about 3 or 4 years of listening to this fella, I realized that he was living in my town. And I was thinking, how the hell can I get in touch with this guy? So left a few messages on his social media, blah, blah. And I was drinking at, I'm Irish, I like a drink. I was drinking at a bar in Holloway's Beach in Cairns. And I was chatting to this woman in around when COVID started. And her name was Candy. And talking about the vaccine, blah, blah, blah. I said, did you get it? No fucking way. Excuse my language. Can I swear? Okay, good. Just check it. She said, no way, I would not get that rubbish. And we started just having this big conversation about a lot of different things. And I brought up Romley and Justinian Deception. She goes, he was my ex. I'm like, what? She's going, yeah, he's my ex. And he goes, he lives in Cairns? Yeah, he lives up the hill in Eredlin. I'm like, holy shit, I want an introduction to this guy. He says, yeah, here's his number. So I texted him a few messages at the risk of kind of bordering on being stalking, and he never answered me back. And I'm like, okay, so that's fine. So then I stumbled across a common law group in my local town and did a few presentations about health for the common law group. And all of a sudden, I was on call. So I got a bit of a more responsibility with doing things with the group. And Austin is a good mate of mine who helps run the group over there. He said, hey, guess what? I've got somebody really amazing that's going to do a talk for us. I was going, who is it? It's going to, Romley Stewart? Really? So fantastic. So Rom's rocked up and I got a chance to, find out where he lived. I said, listen, would you mind if I call in, see you, talk about a few things? So I had this fella who, when you see things from America, when you see things from England, when you see things from Canada, so many people reference this guy in relation to common law. It is not funny. So many people say that he is the one who cracked the code of the legal system. And to be honest with you, I don't think they're off the mark. especially since I've had a lot to do with him personally. So a lot of this talk is about relaying that information in a way that makes sense to people who, I don't think I'm a genius. I'm kind of average intelligence. So I've really got to concentrate on stuff to work it out. And as a result, hopefully people like yourselves can benefit. And I'm sure when it comes to intelligence, I'm certainly not talking, down to people up here. I think we've got a very, very clever and bright group in Koh Samui, and I'm really honored that you guys see value in what I'm going to be delivering to you today. Thank you. Okay, so so disclaimer, do your own research. Am I an expert? No, I'm not an expert. It's a sharing of knowledge. The whole area of common law is nuanced and it's subjective. And even when we're going through this video, there'll be, I've got a hierarchy of law, for example. That's debatable. That's okay. But if it gives you the kind of concepts that I have about common law, and it allows you to take a springboard to build forward and to modify your thoughts on it, fantastic. So don't kind of pin me down if you can and say, well, that's not right, this is not right, because you're probably correct. So it's more the theme and the framework and how we can use it that I want to really try to convey across to you guys, if that's okay. I'll share this PDF with whoever wants it via email or however you want. But I've got behind these photographs some links embedded in them about some people I've interviewed on my YouTube channel. And that was the other thing I want to say. I kind of decided I got to get some information about health and this kind of stuff out there. So I started a channel called Awakening in Health. Shadow banned everywhere. You probably wouldn't have heard of me, should I say. But I've managed to get some great interviews with some really, really cool people on that channel. So any support you can give me on that and share it around and have a look and criticize or make comments is more than welcome. But the names I've got up on that screen there, a fellow at the very top corner, Tom Barnett, fantastic fellow. He went viral for basically saying viruses don't exist. But he has got a really great perspective on how karmic law, biblical law, and common law works. And he's well worth a listen to kind of just shape into this path of least resistance feeling about law. And we're all stuck in this place of we need to fight back, we need to fight back. And at the end of this journey that I'm going to try and share with the people here is a theme of not fighting, but actually a theme of acceptance. And it's a lot easier to accept than to fight. Now, another fellow under here, Zev Freeman, did a cracking interview with him. And Zev's really good, very clever, knows this stuff backwards, a little bit mercenary though. So when you talk to him, he wants to get paid. That's fair. Dick Yardley, I spoke to somebody else here about. And Dick probably is one of the foremost constitutional experts in Australia. And the reason, and he's well worth listening to, but as I was saying, I've got his research. He gave it to me on a USB drive. Again, I'm happy to share it with people. And I tried to look at it for a couple of hours and I just got stuck after that. I couldn't read anymore. I couldn't relate it to real life. And Dick's been in court so many times, but he hasn't really won. And this, I want to take nothing away from Dick. He's a beautiful, beautiful guy. He stayed at my house for this presentation in Cairns, and his depth of knowledge is incredible. So as a resource, I rate him highly, but I think we have to be looking at solutions. We have to be looking at things that can work for us. And this is where Rom falls into his own, okay? And then in the corner here is Rom at that presentation where I first managed to get a hold of him. But during that presentation, I was able to ask him some questions that made the penny drop for me about where he was getting this from. So I've included that. I've kind of made those links in this discussion that I couldn't get from just watching his video. So you got the benefit of my confusion and putting this stuff together, okay? Now, this is important. Who's heard of this bloke here? Edward Mandell House. Any hands? This is, we got a very clever, surprised me at all. This is really important. He wrote this to Woodrow Wilson. And I'll read it here. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property. Do we need to interrupt? Yeah, no, absolutely. Jump in. Listen, I'll paraphrase this because it's a fairly long little discussion there. But what he says is we're going to make a system so convoluted, and if anybody works it out, they're going to be considered crazy. And by the time everybody else jumps in and realizes they're right, it will be too late because we will own everything and we'll have the common people as our cattle, as our slaves, and we will take all the fruits of their work or their labor. That's essentially what that says. How did I do paraphrasing that, Eamon? That's more or less what it says. Yeah. So this is a rough hierarchy, and there's spin put on this, but as an idea, this is just an idea to help give you an idea of where this hierarchy is from. But you could swap these around if you wanted to, or you could put different spins in it. Okay. So at the very top, we can split law into two: the law of the land and the law of the sea. This is essentially what it's all about. And at the very top, we've got natural law. And natural law, you can really pin into just one sentence. It's the only thing we need to worry about. Do no harm. If everybody stuck to that, we wouldn't need any other law. Okay? But obviously, we can't stick to it, so a few other things filter in. And underneath that, we have biblical law. This is why we swear on the Bible in courts. And there's some people that would argue that the true nature of the biblical law that underpins all other law is actually the Talmudic law. And the Talmud essentially is a variation of the Old Testament. People don't know. Underneath that, we have law of the land. You could swap those around if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter. You could say the law of the land precedes, should I say, biblical law. It doesn't really matter, but it's kind of up there. It's what we do other when we are on. It's like having a bad Oscar moment up here. Jeez. Okay, so then what happened in around the kind of Venetian system, and Eamon would be a great person to pick his brains on where he kind of puts all these little pieces. You had, even this can go back to seafaring times, to way earlier, to even Babylonian times, where you had your shipping merchants, okay? And that's an important word. The root of the word merchant, mer, is the same as mermaid, mermen. It means of the water. And these merchants are going around in their ships and selling goods and making profits and kind of having a lot of control in the world. But as things started to open up, the people on the land started involving themselves in the work of being merchants, and the people on the ships kind of thought, hang on a second, this is not good for our profits. So the normal story goes is there had to be some standardization of the systems all around the world so it was fair. That's rubbish. That's not what happened. The people with the ships who owned all the money wanted to have full control of everything, so they created this system of merchant law. Underneath that, we have admiralty law. And admiralty law is a newish kind of paradigm which addresses legal issues at the sea. And then underneath that, we have the legal system. And the legal system has blown out to thousands of domains: your family law, your tax law, your shopping law, your Iraq law, your Irish law, your whatever law. Every law you can think of fits under this. And what most people don't understand is that every single one of those courts or those laws have their own language. And we think that the people who are talking to us from the court system, the magistrates, the judges, we think they are using an artful way of talking. No, they're not. They're deliberately using loaded language that means other things that trap us. And they give us approximately a 20% win rate, and we lose 80% of the time. And there's a big reason for that, and that's because it's all to do with accounts, and it's all about taking our energy and taking our money. And once we understand that, then we can do something about the system. Okay, so let's discuss language. Put your hand up if you can read that the title of this page. Can anybody, put hands up, please? A show of hands. Nearly everybody. There's some interesting people there. Okay, for everyone that has put their hand up, you cannot read that. But what you've done is you have now entered into a contract of presumption that you can read it thinking it's English. It's not English. And this is how they trap us, okay? So this is where legalese comes from. And there's a few books where we can find out all this information. They show us everything. They tell us everything. It's all there, but they hide it. And this is where Rom comes into his own, because he's uncovered some of this stuff, not without a lot of help from all over the world, including a lot of legal minds, okay? And some of your references are a thing called Black's Law Dictionary. Anybody heard of this? Load of references. This now, I think it's about that 8th, 9th edition, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Bouvier's, Merriam-Webster, etc., etc., etc. There are lots of different dictionaries and resources that tell us how we should look at language. And now let's go into spelling. It's not called spelling for no reason. We're casting spells. If we look at things like cymatics, Everything is about vibration and energy. My feeling is that this idea of in Babylonian times, when the tower crumbled, we all could not communicate with each other. I think we were maybe using different sorts of sounds rather than the actual verbiage, the words that we use now. Okay, I think there might have been some attack on our pineal glands. I don't know, but I don't think we communicated like this before. I think we could probably all communicate in a different way. During my tenure in mental health, I had the experience of doing about 1.5 years in a thing called drug court. So I had to had a lot of involvement with criminals. So I had to end up going to court at least twice a week. So I was directly involved in all the ceremony that went on in court twice a week. And at that time, I had no idea about the occult system that was behind the charade. And it is an occult system, okay? I'll jump down to the bottom of this page first. So what we're talking about is the capital system. This is why that top line is in capitals, okay? And there's some explanations later on in these slides that I'll show you. But essentially, the capital system is a dead system. I'm going to open this up a little bit more. This now boils down into what you hear about your straw man. And I want to make sense of this concept of your straw man a little bit later, because I could never get my head around that for a while. And also it relates to your capital, your last name. And if you look at all your documents, your last name is in capitals, and that is very, very important. It's a dead system. So let's look at some of the language. When we're taken into court and the magistrate says, all rise, I always thought he was saying stand up. He's not saying stand up. He is summoning you. You get your summons. He's summoning the dead. And when he says all rise, he's raising the dead, because a magistrate cannot talk to a living person. A living person is only of the land. And again, we'll open that up in a little while. Things are inverted. Have we noticed that? Everything's inverted. Why do we swear in the Bible? What's swearing? It's cursing. So it's blasphemy. The system is a satanic, occult, inverted system. Who's thought about that? Swearing on the Bible. Fuck you. Fuck you, God. This is what we're doing. And no, we don't think about it. The mage, the magician, the magistrate wears a black cloak, wears a witch's hat, has a wand. We call it a gavel and a wig. All occult symbolism. The bench. Bench in Latin means bank. He's a banker. He's balancing books. We always thought he was doing stuff that was moral. There's an element of that because he's got to keep up the pretense, or she. But no, he's balancing the books. He's a banker. Summons, we said. Sentence. A sentence? A sentence is, what's a sentence? A collection of words together. Okay? A sentence. So again, we're spelling again. We submit in the court. We submit this, we submit that. Submission. Here's my submission, Your Honor. We're bending to somebody's will. The language is so important. We have bail bonds, bondage, enslavement. And then the big word, corporation. Break that word down. Corpse. The root of that word is dead. Oration is speaking. It means dead person talking, dead entity talking. Okay? And then we have our vibrations. There's a woman did a lovely little poem on this, and I've kind of picked a few things from a few different places. But it's likely that the vibrations we're using from here carry spells, carry sounds, carry elements of magic with them. And I'll explain. So, okay, so we'll keep on going. So week, we work through the week. What else is week? Taking our energy. Who's heard of this one before? Anybody? Then we go to the weekend. We're weakened. Okay, we wake up. We wake up at the start of our days. We walk around in a daze. We have our energy taken consistently. And when we wake up, what do we say to somebody else? Good morning. What's awake? Awake is a funeral celebration. And what's morning? So we spend our existence in this system where I believe the words have been deliberately put upon us to have these negative vibrations which are affecting us. We just left off with sounds and vibrations. And again, we just talked about the possible interference with our energy around some of the words we used. And we just started getting into days of the week, being weakened, being in a daze, getting up and being in a death cult system. Good morning. Waking up. Hello, hell. So many examples of these words. Parents, the root of the words parents, a pair who rents. If you're a parent, you don't own your children. If you're a mother and a father, it's very different. Even the word children. Okay, all these words mean different things in different dictionaries. And when you go to court, you're fighting against an unfair system. You think you understand their language, you don't. Childhood. What do we do if we want to blind somebody, confuse somebody, make them stupid? We can put a hood over their head. Parenthood. Live. Inversion. The opposite of live is evil. Rite. A rite of passage. We write. A lot of ritualistic language, symbolic language in English. Latin is much more direct. Latin used to be the way we used to communicate before. A chapter, you have chapters in cults and societies. They're also in books. You page somebody, you summon somebody. Okay, there are also pages in books. I threw that one in there. We have some booze. What does a ghost do? Boo. Entities, spirits, drinking. Cheers, everybody. Thought you'd like that. There's a few people who go into this, and there's links on this document again, which I can pass out to people. Jordan Maxwell, who's heard of him? Interesting dude, goes into a lot of this more occult way that the systems were formed. And there's another one by a psychiatrist in England. I can't remember his name, but I've got the link there, The Occult Art of Law. He does a great little 45 minutes presentation on this. Okay, so our seafaring language. So again, the root of the word merchant and mer. It's of the sea. Now, here are a few little statements. They're both from Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Maternity is always certain, while the paternity is only presumed. This is important. So therefore, all naturally born children are illegitimate. They're bastards with uncertain parenthood, having no parental holder of their estate. And the next one is the meaning of bastard. Considered as nullius filius. A bastard has no inheritable blood in him, and therefore no estate can descend to him. Okay? This is how they trap us. They keep on throwing different layers and different layers and different layers to steal our birthrights. Technically, when we're born, we should have a share of the land, a share of the energy, a share of the things that go along with it. But that's been taken from us in a very, very clever way, which we'll go into. If I can move this, which hopefully I can. Okay, now we get to the more interesting parts of stuff. So it's no surprise that the system was some people say, and I tend to lean towards this, there's so many variations of history, we don't even know what's right or wrong. But let's presume that some of the history we're given has some form of accuracy. But the banking system, you could say the modern banking system started in Venice. And there's a reason why Venice is on the water. So that's very symbolic. This means that the legalities, the law, the system is water-based. And then we have things like the City of London, Washington, D.C., the Vatican, District of Columbia, Disney. They are all their own independent ships or lands. They have their own governments. They have their own laws. Did you know, who knows Disney had its own laws? Disney has its own laws. There's ways that even we, to a certain extent, can do this, okay? But essentially, a good framework to get your head around what's going on is that we are on the land, but when we're dealing in commerce, we have to step aboard these different ships. This is why we have something called citizenship. City is a town, is a place. Zen is a dweller. Okay? So a citizen is somebody who lives in a city for the purposes of commerce. And then we contract with the merchant or the ship that we're dealing with at any given time. Does that make sense? Perfect. Ships are female. This is important because they carry a product. Mothers also carry a product. Okay? They carry a baby. Mothers, the baby passes through a birth canal. Okay? This is very symbolic. Ships pass through a canal. They carry a certificate or a manifest. Okay, that's your birth certificate. Where do you park a boat? You park it in a berth, don't you? Okay, this is why the word berthing is used. We have it in a dock. Okay, who delivers a child? The doctor. A physician cannot sign a birth certificate, but a doctor can. Did you know that? Interesting, we look at the manners. Crossing the bar. In order to engage with the system, we need a representative. We need a legal person like a solicitor or a barrister, and they have to cross the bar to pass their exams. It's a sandbar. It's all seafaring terminology. Bankruptcies, two sides of a river. They're banks. You have currents flowing through both banks. The bank goes under, it's bankrupt. They got to get a bailout, bailing water from the boat. Maritime language all the way through. The gate in the court from the galley. As soon as you're outside, when you're outside the gate, you're on land. But as soon as you enter that gate, you're on a ship. And you're bound by the rules of that ship. Are we starting to see now where the idea and the concept about common law, we can possibly use it? Because we're trying to take our rights back from the land. We're trying to identify who we are and where we are. We literally sold our soul. Your parents sold you souls. You thought that that little footprint that was on that paper that they used, they put the baby's foot in ink and put it on a piece of paper. That was symbolic. They gave away your parents without knowing it. They gave away your soul if you had that done. Again, citizenship, corporation, we talked about that before. Your surname, S-I-R, it's part of the capital system. It's very, very important what you identify as. And there's a difference between your surname and what we should be perceiving as our clan name and our family name. And we've been given to believe that they're both the same. They are not. They are not. Interestingly as well, God, there's a lot of people who say that the words GODs mean different things, but an interesting one, which again Romley comes out with, is God, meaning grantor of dominion. Grantor of dominion. So there can be many different gods in this system. So we gotta kind of know our position and know where we're standing. Where did it all start? This is the title of Rom's channel. It's called Justinian Deception. And you can trace this fairly firmly back to a fellow called Justinian, who ended up being a Roman emperor. So there's a statement here. Justinian killed man without anyone ever knowing that they were all legally dead, sacrificed at birth, and dumped into the sea, a sea of commercial paper, in order to be salvaged by the Roman Empire before they were ever aware that they were assumed dead, lost at sea, and never likely to return. And this is the underpinning of our legal system, believe it or not. Justinian, the Emperor of Rome, and his legal team between the years, again, if we can believe this, 1530 and 1560, created a governmental masterpiece of modern-day deception in order to deceive the public into falling into the private military contracts of the Roman Empire under the direct control of the Vatican in order to forego true justice. So this fellow started it all with the Vatican, hand in hand. And then shortly afterward, Magna Carta in 1215, a fellow called Accursius. That name is interesting because he added to the curse, okay? He was a Roman jurist, and in around 1230, I'm not even going to pronounce that, he basically completed what Justinian started and added to the dead corporate system. So the corporate system really sprung off the back of Accursius, okay? Now we get into these terms of what we call a legal fiction, okay? And these are interpretations of these words. Legal is fiction. A statue, what does a statue do? It sits on a pulpit. It's not real, it's a representation. This is why we follow statutes. Statutes are not law, and law is not legal, but statutes are legal. Do I have to explain that again, or do people understand this? You got it? Okay, fantastic. Legislation, the leg of a statue, really means shit. It's not law, okay? An act. What's an act? A pretense. What do the governments give us every single friggin' time? They give us pretenses. And we just accept them because we don't know any better. Who's heard of maxims of law? Lots of maxims of law come from, excuse me, Bouvier's Law Dictionary. And maxims are things that you consider to be set to be done that can't really be contested. Okay, if you throw a ball in the air, we know it's going to drop down into the ground. It's more or less a maxim. Okay, well, I don't want to get into a debate about gravity and all these kind of things, but let's pretend we believe that gravity is given to us the way we're told. It's a maxim. Things fall down. Okay, they're the same things in law, and knowing your maxims of law mean that you have a leg up in understanding what they're trying to do with you. But they put legislation, acts, statutes in the way, so you never get to the bottom of your maxims of law. So there's a few important ones. Again, this thing is, hopefully I can move this out the way. The law is from the people, and statutes are from the state. Think of the words policeman. Getting trapped. There we go. Think of the words policeman, policy officer, police officer. What's an officer? Works in an office. Okay, so police officers have two roles. They can be a constable, which means they look after the rights of people. Actually, and even that's not correct. I'll say humans, or men and women, sorry. Or they're policy officers. Their job is to take money from you and to keep the profits in the corporation. That's what they are meant to. They don't even know this. But every time they're stuck in a corner, taking your money, taking your fines, charging you. What do you think it's called charging? It's about taking your energy, taking your money. Relates all back to Justinian and to Curtius. So again, Bouvier's Law Dictionary, joinder. It's an important word. It's similar to a thing called usufruct. It's the right to derive income from the property of another. Who feels that all these pricks are just taking our energy and taking our money and taking everything from us all the time? Bank, interest rates, usury, taxes, which are fraud. Even the word to me that jumps out, and I've got no relevance to this, just it's a funny one, metric. It changed from the imperial system. Metric, me, trick. Was it another trick putting us? Possibly. I don't know. If anybody wants to do some digging into that, let me know. Please feel free to. So we just talked about reading. And now we're going to break it down a little bit more. And this is relevant because this happens in the documents you get from everybody, from the banks, from the courts, from your bills, you name it. And if you can start tackling some of this stuff, you start getting a way out of things. Okay? So can you read? What I've got there, that's in English. But here's a better example. Samples of how the fraud text appears. So underneath, what, quote unquote, this is proper English descriptive text. That is proper text. You have your capital, which is what's it called? A noun. The rest, so there's one capital at the beginning, you've got a capital for your proper noun, and then you've got the rest in small case. This is normal English. This follows the grammatical rules of English. I'm going to digress for a couple of seconds. When Romley used to go through this stuff in his videos, I was just going, where the friggin' hell is this guy getting this stuff from? And when he did that presentation, that's live, by the way, so you can see me asking the question and you can see his response to it, but the penny just dropped. When he was 17, he did an apprenticeship with a sign writer, and his sign writer was in his 70s. So as a sign writer, this guy had to go through all the mechanisms of advertising. And the way you do that is through something called the Chicago Styles Manual. There's about 3 or 4, but the Chicago Styles Manual sits right at the top. And it's the Chicago Styles Manual that sets out the rules for advertising. So if I have in capital, if I have in small case, actually this is relevant to Patrick and Rob here, the best pad thai in Koh Samui. If I write that in English and somebody comes along and challenges that, I've made a claim. And if my claim is not accurate, I may be required to give compensation. But if I write it in capitals, it's not English. It breaks the rules of English. It's a graphic or something that's called a glossa. So this is why advertising boards are written predominantly in capitals with subtext underneath. And I'm sure so many people have forgotten now that they mix it up. But if you have advertising in capitals, you cannot be sued for it because it's a graphic. It's a glossa. This is so important to where we're going next to understand this. Now, when we come to Latin, you can write Latin in all capitals, but it has to be hyphenated. So this hyphen is hyphen, proper hyphen, written hyphen, language, all the way to text. This is legible. We can read this because this follows the rules of Latin. And again, it references the Chicago Manual of Styles. Okay, what's under that is if I start reading this in the form of English, I'm entering into a contract. I'm entering into the legalese system. So from a safe point of view, I cannot read what I'm going to say next. This text is dog Latin, being Latin text based on the grammatical rules of English. It's just based on the rules, and I'm making a presumption. If you guys think I'm reading it and you can follow those lines, you're also making just a presumption because it's not English. It's a picture, and you're interpreting the picture. Notice no hyphens. This is known as debased Latin, dog Latin, the language of the illiterate. And this is from Black's Law Dictionary, edition 4. So even though you assume you can read it, you can't. It's impossible. So this is based on the law of presumption. And glossa is another way of describing this. Now, interestingly, Romley went to a common law meeting, and this was, I believe, about 8-9 years ago. It was a significant time ago, and it was a law meeting that was in where I live. It's a place called the Tablelands, and some of the stories he's got are just really quite fantastic. They're amazing, and I've got no reason to doubt him. He's a lovely guy, and I think he's genuine. But he's been approached by all sorts of people on a global basis: high-level Freemasons, banks, magistrates, courts, you name it. But somebody in this one particular meeting, they'd never seen him before, rocked up in this at the time brand new, really expensive car. And the guy pulled him aside afterwards and he said, "Rom," he said, "you'll never see me again. You will never know who I am. My name is X, but I'm going to tell you something." He said, "You're the closest person in the world to ever get even close to cracking this whole system. And there's one word which I want you to remember. And that word is the word parity." And he went. And Rom sat with that for years before he finally got it. And essentially, if you look at the word parity, it's a creative work designed to imitate, comment on, or mock its subjects by means of satirical or ironic imitation. And that is what they do to us. The whole of our language, the whole of the court system, the whole structure of these pricks who are enslaving us, as far as they're concerned, it's a parody. And we think it's real and we fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Okay? Now, here's an interesting one. So when Romley first got the Chicago Styles Manual, it's something like 1,100 pages. And basically, when he got that, he basically said, "I give up. There's no way I can even read this." But one of the people he collaborated with heavily was a fellow called Rowan, who's got another incredible story. He's been in prison because of all this stuff. He's actually in hiding now because of literally this stuff. Okay, he's been in hiding for about 4 or 5 months to date. And Rowan is a researcher. And in the middle of the night, Rowan, by this really weird circumstance, ended up staying in Romley's place, blah, blah, blah. And they started collaborating. And Rowan ran into the room one day and he said, "Rom, I've got it. And the key to putting so many of the pieces of this puzzle together was in the Chicago Styles Manual. Guess which page? Page 666. I don't know. And in page 666, this is what it says: "Two languages on one document do not have jurisdiction with each other." Who can get an inkling of the significance of this? Anybody? Or would I'll just let people think about that for a sec. Anybody think this is important? Okay. Absolutely, null and void a document. Absolutely. So all our documents are technically null and void if they're a mixture of debased Latin or dog Latin and English. And you can even go further because our italics mean something, our underlines mean something, our brackets mean something, and all this is in things like the Chicago Styles Manual. So most of our documents, nearly all of them, are fraudulent. And a maxim of law is that fraud invalidates all contracts. Something that is common law stuff. So there's also these trifectas that exist then when we come to the situation that involves us and the system. And now we're leaning towards what we heard in this video before, okay? And there's a number of different ways to think about it. Some of them, I even get confused. Some of them are fairly clear. But one of the trifectas is there's always three parties at play. One way of looking at that is a benefactor or a beneficiary and an administrator. And what that means is that somebody administrates, and I'll use the word trust because that's very relevant. Okay, somebody administrates our trust. They decide what happens, but the benefactor tells the administrator what to do. And the beneficiary picks up the crumbs. Okay, so you're the administrator, you're the benefactor, I'm the beneficiary, and you might say, oh yeah, give him $10 for the week. And because I don't know my position, I just go, oh, isn't that great? And I walk off happy. But we can assume the position of benefactor because we have these birthrights. And that's where it starts to get tricky. If we can assume our position, another way of thinking about this is on a ship. Again, remember, citizenship. The captain is taking people everywhere. He's not controlling everything. It's the passengers that pay him to take them someplace. And then you have the crew. And we've been all put in this position where we are the crew. We're not the passengers. We don't have all the rights of the passengers. We sleep in different bunks. We get fed what we're given. We get ordered around. And the passengers have that freedom. So all this is still analogous with maritime law. And then when we start to look at the systems that we're beholden to, our councils and our governments and our schools, they're all registered on the Dun and Bradstreet company, which lists every single corporation. And guess what? So is your name. So is your birth certificate. You're a corporation. Okay? And we never knew that. So we never knew that we should be, in fact, the benefactor, not the beneficiary. It is not merely of some importance, but it is of fundamental importance that justice should not only be done, the word should is really important there, but should manifestly and undoubtedly be seen to be done. Think about this. This is from Lord's Chief Justice Stewart in England, based on I think from around 1924, and it was involved somebody who was a party to a decision going on in a back room somewhere, and I think just from memory, one of the people involved in the judicial decision was a relative of the guy who the decision went against. Okay. And this underpins so much of our law now that justice just has to be seen to be done. These pricks do not care about justice, but they need to pretend it's being done to placate us. This is very important. Who here has a name? If you want, but what you really should have is you should have an appellation. Again, they use words against us. Words are our enemy unless we know what's going on. An appellation. The definition of an appellation is the title or the name of someone. An example of an appellation is the name Tom. This is from Webster's Dictionary. What's a name? Maxim of law. Excuse my Latin, I'm going to butcher this probably. Nomen est quasi re notamen. This is where the kind of base of the word names come. A name is, as it were, the distinctive sign or signifier of a thing. A thing is not human. And if you're not human, you don't have any rights. So they all gave us a name as opposed to an appellation. And we just gone, yeah, okay. So they've just got layers and layers and layers of taking our rights away. We never knew it. This is from the Ballantyne's Law Dictionary. There's a lot of them. A human being, a monster, human. Think of that word, hue. A hue is a color. Okay, so it's a color of a being. Hue of a man, a color of a man, which essentially is a monster. A monster hath no inheritable blood and cannot be heir to any land. So they look at us as not men and women. And that's important because if we're not men and women, they can take our rights away. Your dead all capital names are found on graveyards, tombstones. They're on vessels, names on boats and vessels. They're all in capitals. They're found in all your documents, your driver's license. Person. It's a noun. Per, person, Latin persona, said to be compound of per, through or by, and sonus, a sound. If you decide to be a person, you're in the legal system. You're nothing. You lose your rights. This is why corporations are entities. Persons are entities. We should be men and women. As men and women, we have power. As persons, we don't. Who knew that persons were not men and women? I didn't until a while back. A trustee has the right to be compensated for acting as a trustee. However, if you are never made aware of it, how can you be compensated? Okay, and this is where things became really interesting for the whole of the world. In 1966, anybody know a significant thing that happened then? Excuse me? Sorry, 1666, my apologies. I said 19. 1666, yeah, Great Fire of London, okay? Interestingly, around that time, great fires were in every single city. This is how they destroyed our history, one of the ways they destroyed our history. But because they lost so many people, they make up bullshit. They created the birth certification system along with something called, and again, there's different ways of pronouncing that, but SESK is one of the ways, or SESKV, it doesn't really matter. But this is the trust system that everybody is being born with. And different references describe different values to this. It goes down as you get older. Some people say it's to the tune of 100 million. Some people say as you're a baby, it's in the 500s to billions. I don't know. I haven't, just as I said, different people talk about it. So essentially, we're all born, if we're men and women, with a birthright, which is worth a significant amount of money. But because we were registered, the root of that word is regis. It means anything you register, by the way, you've given away to the state. I don't know if you know that. You don't own it anymore. Okay? So we registered, our parents registered us, so they gave all our birthrights to the pricks that are running the world, and now we are just beneficiaries. A legal person in any subject matter to which the law attributes a merely legal or fictitious person, a legal person, is any subject matter to which the law attributes a merely legal or fictitious personality. They think we're all these pieces of fiction. They don't recognize us as men and women. This extension is one of the most noteworthy feats of the legal imagination. Legal persons, being the arbitrary creations of the law, may be of as many kinds as the law pleases. They can just do what they want. Those recognized by our own system, however, all fall within a single class, namely corporations or bodies corporate. We're dead entities if we're persons. This is from a 7th edition of jurisprudence. A legally generated artificial person has no substance, no body, no brain, no consciousness, no heart, no energy, no spirit, no soul. It is merely legal persona in the fictional. It's a theater of commerce, which is prescribed imaginary roles played by actors giving a performance. That's the way they see us when we enter a courtroom. Okay, so again, they tell us everything. All the information is there. It's just up to people a lot cleverer than me to find it, and then up to people like me to tell you guys about it. Let's put that out the way, okay? So again, registration, we register everything. We've given it away. A license is just a permission to break the law. Go shooting, get a license. Kill somebody, get a license. You know, they have people who kill people in the States. It's called execution. So that's all it is. Their terms and conditions. The word mandatory. I always thought mandatory meant we had to do it. It doesn't. Mandatory is an offer. It's in Black's Law Dictionary. And if we presume we have to do it, we have consented. And if I consent, I'm stuffed. Register to vote. We've given our vote away every time we register to vote. Ticking a box. Who do you want to support? This person, this and tick. That's what illiterate people do. So they've conned us into not using our signature, our sign of nature, and to use tick boxes because they think of us as imbeciles. Unless we say we're not, that's the way they're going to treat us. And then back to the corporatization of everything. I'm just trying to think of the reference for Australia. Anybody from Australia? You're not, unless you're a citizen of Australia, because the land that you thought was of Australia is not. It's Terra Australis. Australia technically is specifically defined by the Cocos-Keeling Islands, Christmas Island, and one of the third ones up there. If you specifically look at what Australia is, it's those 3 islands, and they are registered offshore. They're registered offshore. Australia is a scam. And then they change the constitution. So there's some interesting maxims. So this is an interesting little graph here. The trinity of globalist control. The Vatican City, they control religion. The City of London, finance, and Washington D.C., they control the military. So these all work together. Some people say, "Oh, well, this is my understanding and my belief that the Vatican has more power." No, they all work together against us. This is all biblical, and they work together to control every aspect of our existence and our creation. Maxims of law, very important ones. I'm not going to read the Latin, but the burden of the proof lies upon him who affirms it, not he who denies. And this is important now when we start using some of the examples of how we can utilize common law. It means that if you make a claim, you got to back it up. And that's what they do to us. Did you do X? Oh, well, I did, but I did. Oh, you just made a claim. And they screw us with it because then we got to dig around and use all this information to validate our claim. I want you to think about that one. It's very important. Things uncertain are considered as nothing. It's got to be definite. How many uncertainties do they have in the court and we just accept them? These are all maxims of law. False in one thing is false in everything. This means that if you are seen to lie and deceive, they can't trust anything you do. How many liars and cheats and deceptive people, lawyers, liars, we sit there and we think that they can govern us? Every jurisdiction has its boundaries. All these different jurisdictions, these different parts of law, these different countries, they all have limits. They don't cover everything. A party who is silent appears to consent. They change the law. It's not the law. They pass new legislation, new statutes. And if we don't do anything about them, guess what? We have said it's okay. This is the same with contract offers. Legality is not reality. Consent makes the law. A contract is law. A contract is a law between the parties which can acquire force only by consent. So contracts can be enforced, but only if we agree. And we are always agreeing, even if we say nothing, because that's called tacit agreement or tacit acceptance. Unequal things ought not to be joined. Contracts should be fair. How many contracts are we in that ardent? Usury. Paying back the bank, which sells our loans 2, 3, 4 times with fraudulent contracts. Things uncertain are considered, I got that already, sorry. He who errs is not considered as consenting. So in other words, if you make a mistake and they catch you with this stuff. Maxims of law say they're wrong. Interesting about parts of a contract. These are just some, there's some more. It's got to be free and genuine. It's got to be honest. Look at all our bank loans again. We have to consent. How can we consent with the terms and conditions? Who's read the terms and conditions for any app they've downloaded recently? Anybody? I haven't. So how can you consent? Full disclosure. Because they hide all this shit in all this legislation, and as an example with politicians, they give them 2,000 pages to read the night before a major decision, and who the hell knows what's buried in there, and they're told they've got to vote yes. Again, your terms and conditions, your documents. Who even understands them? How does it work when you don't even know that you're not speaking English? Okay? Both parties have to be competent. You have to understand what's going on. Has to be a meeting of the minds. I got to explain everything to you, and you got to say, hey, Dennis, that's a great idea. And now I got to look at you and say, hey, what are you going to give me in return? And I go, wow, that's fantastic. It's a meeting of the minds. Let's do this. Autographs or signatures. Got to have autographs and signatures. You know, the bank doesn't sign your loan contract. There is no signature on it. All third parties have to be, we've got to be told about third parties. They pass our loans on left, right, and center. They sell them on the stock market. Did they inform you? Your mortgage contracts are invalid. And then this is an interesting one again from Black's Law Dictionary. Capitis diminua. Anyway, meaning the diminishing of status through the use of capitalization in Roman law. So when you're capitalizing stuff, you're diminishing it. Essentially, it refers back to your corporate debt system. How are we doing, Patrick? Fantastic. Okay, now let's talk about some real life examples. So when I was going, what, 5 or 10 minutes, you reckon? Okay, I'll try to hurry up if I can. So when I was in the common law group, I was approached by a couple who were told about me by somebody else. And they're happy that I talk about this, by the way. And this was probably about a year ago. And they said, Dennis, we've lost our house. The bank took our house. They kicked us out with bailiffs, and they took all our possessions, locked them up in containers. We want you to help us get it back. Oh, what? Well, I'm going, I can't. Why would you ask me? They said, we know you can do it. I'm like, no, I can't. I'm not an expert in this. I don't know how I can help you here. And they said, listen, we know that you know enough that you can at least make a start. You can go where to look. And I said, okay, listen, I'm willing to get. They said, you're our last hope. They were desperate. And I said, okay, I'll try and help you. But I don't know a lot about this stuff. I just know I'm scratching the surface of this stuff. And I had to think about it. I said, listen, at least I know Rom, and I can bounce a few things off him, but I cannot guarantee absolutely anything. Okay. So and again, I've got my fingers in a few different pies with this. Now, this was a couple who their last letter from the bank said, you're out, you're done. This is happening whether you like it or not. This is 9 months ago. And if I can pull up a letter. So I wrote the bank this letter based on not just Rom's advice, but a lot of others. If I can put this up. Okay. And I'll skip through a few points in it. But this now is common law in action. This is common law in action. And when I wrote this, I'm guessing. I wasn't thinking, hey, we're going to get these guys. I'm looking at this stuff and I'm seeing people do this. Okay, let's give this a go. And I ran it past Rom as well, who had some interesting information. So if you note there, the subject, request for verification of loan, proof of claim, and compensation consideration. They've made claims. You didn't. And I've got a breakdown of some of the basics of this on the next slide. So don't worry too much about it, okay? So we wrote to the CEO personally, and we wrote to the office of all the heirs and successors. So that means she can't resign. Whoever gets into that position has to look at this problem for us. And the strategy that Rom uses, which I really like, is this path of least resistance, which is we accept everything. People think common law, getting into court, it's fighting. No, it shouldn't be fighting. We accept everything, but if we have harm, loss, injury, fraud, we ask for compensation. We don't demand compensation. We ask for it. We suggest it, okay? So the letter went something like this. Dear Shamana, wrote to her personally. Listen, happy to do anything you want with this loan now, but we got a few problems. If you can just reassure us that these problems are okay, that we're not joining you in fraud, for example, do what you want. So here's an example of some of the questions. I'm prepared to resume payment of the promissory note, because essentially that's a whole other story, which we won't get into. To achieve this, I respectfully request the opportunity to visually inspect the original wet ink signature. Banks don't sign your loan. There has to be a signature of two parties on this document. First reason it's in fraud. Anybody, before we move forward, what's the second one based on what we had before? Very good. 2 different languages on a piece of document. Absolutely, 100%. Would it be considered an administrative default as per the administration procedure, if there is a failure to respond to this letter or produce the original wet ink signature? We'll just skip on this one. Can you confirm whether I'm currently in debt to the Macquarie Bank? That's important. They didn't walk away with a case of money and pass that money onto another party. There were some figures generated somewhere. They were told they were given a loan and given money. Where was it? It didn't exist. Fractional reserve lending came out of thin air. Did Macquarie Bank actually possess the money? Would Macquarie Bank consider revising the contract between us in the proper manner, acknowledging that it actually had the money in the bank in the first place? It lied. They make the money every time you make a loan. Was there official record or proper note made in the Macquarie Bank's archives? Were there any third parties they sell your loan on? And the list goes on and on and on, including somewhere in there, was it expected that I could actually read this document? Because now I'm implying that I can't read all that stuff that was in capitals. Didn't make any sense. Okay. So what we've done is we have made no claims. This is very important, but we've asked them to validate their claims. Okay. We got a letter back. Listen, we'll pass you on to X team. We send them another letter going, hey, we're not sure if this is proper form of communication. Do you have authority to talk to us? We wrote a letter to the CEO. Please, next time you talk to us, show us that you have the authority to actually deal with this matter. Oh, sorry, now we're going to pass you on to the litigations team. Litigations team, do you have the authority? Dear Shamana, sorry, does your team? We're writing to her every time, by the way. Next letter, can you please stop writing to her? We don't recognize this communication now. Plus, we put in there that any time we get a communication back via email, we're going to start charging them. Oh, and by the way, in this letter, which is very important, we suggested compensation of $10 million for the property and $10 million for their possessions if they want us to continue with it being involved in this fraud. So what we're trying to do at this stage is set up a bill. And the best thing that can happen is something called tacit agreement and tacit acceptance if they ignore us. So we've gone through this process to date where they have. Oh, the other thing with that, there's a thing that underpins all contracts, which I forgot to mention, a thing called UCC, which is Uniform Commercial Code. And there are lots of variations of Uniform Commercial Code, but you can kind of tie them all into the same paradigms, I guess, for want of a better word. And one of the really important things with that is to remain in honor. This is why you never refuse a contract. You accept everything, but with conditions. Accept everything with conditions, except you make sure the conditions are going to really work in your favor. So I asked them when we were working this, I said, what would it take for you to be happy to lose all this stuff? What's your house worth? 800 grand. Well, would you accept 2 million for it? No fucking way. They kicked us out. Well, would you accept 7 million? No. Would you accept 10 million for a house and 10 million for the property, for your possessions? They were like, actually, yeah, that'll work. Let's go with that then. Let's go with that. So now it's got to the stage with the way they communicated to us, they've agreed to our offer, technically, because they haven't responded to us in the appropriate way. So the next part, I'm heading back to Cairns in a week and a half to set a court proceeding with the magistrates for default of a debt. And there's a rule of 3 involved. So we went 3 of these letters, 10 million every single time. They went around in circles. One email went back saying, we are taking your possessions. You can do nothing about this. Don't contact us again. That house is still there. The possessions are still there. The person on the lot where the containers are said, I will call you if anything happens. And they had a sign outside that house, and they had maintenance people in the place about 4 or 5 months ago. Nothing's happened since. So this is working. Otherwise, that house would be sold. Okay. So from a very, very technical common law point of view, we've created that they're in default. And we're thinking that, again, I'll bounce a lot of this off Rom, and Rom reckons that the bank are in big trouble. If you're a corporation and you're in default of a debt, you've got 7 days or else they close your corporation down. Rom reckons that this could compromise the Macquarie Bank. That's one example, okay? Again, I don't know how this is going to pan out, but it's friggin' interesting, isn't it? It is bloody interesting. And again, I'm always validating the information I'm putting in here with other resources. So I haven't done this lightly, even though I would say that I'm far from an expert and I'm winging it big time as well. Okay. Let's look at another one. Very top of that page. What have we got? It's this payment that we have to do. So why the hell is it called a notice? We've just presumed it's a legal thing that we got to pay. It's a friggin' notice. Okay. Then as we go through it, the name on it, it's in capitals. Who the hell is that? My name is Dennis. It's not this graphic. So interestingly, before I left here, I was using a car of my friend's, and his name was Chris. So Chris got a letter for 2 parking fines, not dissimilar to this. And I said to Chris, listen, can I play with this? He's gone, yeah, sure. So it was an infringement notice for parking, a parking fine. There's nothing fine about it, by the way. Far from it, in fact. It's very deceptive. And so I was driving. The car was registered in his name. He got the letter. So Chris, me, wrote back to these guys, saying, listen, got a couple of problems here. I enclosed a check for, there was 2 within 3 days. So I enclosed a check for the full amount. And I said, please cash this check if you can validate your claim that something wrong happened here. But I got a few questions here. 1, can I read this document? If they say I can, they're lying. I've got them. If they say I can't, they're admitting to the fraud, so they're stuffed. The second one I said was, who was driving? By the way, there's the word driving. If you look in Black's Law Dictionary, it's traveling for the purpose of commerce. Okay? If you're traveling, you don't have to pay fines. All these little words, these tricks that they get us with. Okay? The third one was, where's your authority coming from? The fourth one was, are you a corporation? And are you registered overseas? Am I compelled to pay this? Got a letter back saying, please wait, don't do anything. That was 3 months ago. Nothing's happened since. And what you find when you see other people doing this is the problem seems to go away because they just don't know what to do with it. Okay? And then the final one, the final one, listen, I'm just going to talk about the final one. And because I know I've only got a few minutes left, is how we talk to police. And police officers are trained. They don't know this language. They don't even know they're speaking it. They're just told what they have to say. But it's convenient enough that what they say falls into the legalese paradigm. Okay? So we come back to the basic rules of common law. We accept everything. We accept everything. But there's one massive thing to note. If you ask a question, you cannot enter into a contract. This is why we have this word asking as king. It's impossible to enter a contract if you're only asking a question. Policeman knocks on your car window. Mr. Kell, what do you do? You realize you're speeding here today? If you answer in an affirmative or a negative, you are entering into a contract. If you're admitting that you're answering to the person of Kell, you're entering into a contract. Okay? So an answer might be something like, they always say as well, do you understand? That means, do you stand under my authority? As soon as you say I understand to anybody in authority, you are giving your authority away. They know these words. Okay? So my answer might be a question. Sorry, officer or constable, are you acting under your oath today? Because they have an oath on the one hand where they're dealing with men and women, but a policy, officer obligation, and a fiduciary agreement with their company to take our money. Do you clarify where they're standing? Do you have a license? Actually, it's a registered license. Do I actually own this? Or does your corporation own this? Question, 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 question. Where's the emergency? Was there harm, loss, or damage? Why should I pay compensation? So these are small strategies that we can use, and I've seen them in action where they just go, this is in a too hard basket. Just go. Just go. And then if you get your fine, you can do this with it. Okay? So we'll summarize. I got a couple of more slides, but again, I can just basically explain it. We have much more standing than we think. We have much more standing than we think. We just never knew it. And what we can do, there is this, some people go down the lines of combating the system and standing in their man or woman place, their man or woman position. And this means that you're a benefactor. But this is where you can also step into being a belligerent. And if you're a belligerent, there's something called the Lieber Code. If you read that, they can kill you. It's actually quite draconian what's in there. They can hang you, they can quarter you. There's about 10 things, starve you, this, and this. But what I prefer, and Romley is in the man or woman position. He is now a benefactor. And I asked him, was it worth it? He said, no. I said, would you do it again? He said, once I saw the truth, I would have to. But we don't have to take those measures. We just know what's going on and we challenge these using UCC and contract law, we can still keep our ship, our citizenship, but we can work, we can work for the inside and use their rules against them by not committing to their contracts and by making our own. Okay? And essentially, that's the crux of the whole discussion, is to recognize how our language has been corrupt, how our positions have been hidden from us. If you really want to take that next step, you may have to do without the benefits of the state. So there is an advantage to being on different ships, but you can increase your position on these ships by knowing this information. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
Thank you so much, Dennis. That was awesome. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Okay, so I'm sure you have lots of questions, and there the hand shoots right up.
If I could trouble just one person now that the hard work is out the way.
Coming up. Tony.
Dennis, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
I would like to, so your experience is mostly in Australia, I'm not sure.
Yeah, very much, yes.
But what about inheritance tax in the UK?
Yep, fraud.
Can we contest that?
Well, okay.
I mean, after listening to you, I'm almost tempted to go back to the UK just to fucking fight them. You know what I'm saying?
Don't fight. Don't fight.
Just for shits and giggles.
My suggestion is you don't fight it. You accept it. But sorry, who's talking here? I don't know.
It's me. Sorry.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Hello, mate,
yeah. My suggestion is you don't fight it. But would it cause you loss?
Well, I don't want to pay. My mum's house.
Yeah.
Is worth quite a lot of money, would it be
a loss?
Huh?
Would it be a loss? Would you
lose?
Of
the value of the house.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if it's a loss, what should you do based on what we talked about just before? Ask for compensation.
Oh, okay.
How much?
But in a very nice way. Yeah.
Listen, love what you do. I'm your buddy. I'm not belligerent.
Who do we lodge that appeal with? If in the case of inheritance tax, for example,
the tax office, I'm guessing. That's another thing that falls into this, and this digs a bit deeper. But you need to have everything notarized. You need to have everything in the public domain.
Okay.
And for example, one of the things that I did with this case with the house was we lodged everything with the Governor General. Okay. So as long as it's on record, it's there. It appears.
You kind of make yourself so.
So my letter would go like, listen, hey, this tax, by the way, if you're involved in fraudulent acts or acts that harm or hurt people, all your tax, by the way, a lot of it's going to the Ukraine. You're a criminal by paying your tax. That's one thing. So, hey, where's my money going? Happy to pay this inheritance tax. But there's harm, loss, or damage at this stage. If I'm involved in fraud, I need compensation. How does $15 million sound? By the way, would that cover you if you got 15 million out of it? Oh, well, make it fucking 50 then. Okay, so that's the strategy. Accept everything, ask for compensation.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Dennis. Oh, yeah, go. Okay, Tom, who is it?
I know. Okay, that's good. That's good. I have a whole bundle of questions.
We won't have to do that after.
I've got to choose one.
Yeah, choose one.
Okay, so I'll go Cameron first.
Okay.
Fucking great stuff, though. Really, really good stuff.
Thank you, Anne. Really happy.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to questions here first. Anyone here in the room have a question? Okay, Andrea.
Nice presentation. Thank you so much. Did you you use the English language as base? Did you try to play with these kind of words in other languages? Japanese, Chinese, German?
Not sure, but I'm sure that the deception is global. So there would be iterations of how they've corrupted things to do what they want to do. But great question. And I've actually thought that myself. And it'd be great to talk to your friend, the lawyer, the Thai guy. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Question.
I have a very relevant question to that.
All good. Keep them coming.
An evolution of language must give us a point in time at which these words came into usage.
Yes.
So we can really pinpoint it. I mean, you pointed out the timeline, but we can independently verify that that's correct by looking at the evolution of language. Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry. It was more of a comment.
Yeah, which is a valid comment. I would agree with that.
But I could have turned it into a question.
Dennis, again, I really loved your talk.
Fantastic.
What about common law in Thailand?
Listen, again, so this is where your UCC comes into play. And UCC was derived for countries to interact with each other. So if Thailand has any involvement in commerce, which it does, by dealing with other countries, they have to follow at least some UCC principles, if not a hell of a lot of them. So absolutely. But the little curveball there might be the imperial aspect of China and Japan, but absolutely the concept of common law would definitely apply. And that's why at the beginning, I said I use the term common law loosely.
Thank you.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
Good. Cameron? Yeah.
So I have an interesting one.
Yeah.
Understanding everything is vibrational frequencies, energy, and none of this is really real at the same time. It is. So the paradox of all of that, with the history of the 3D world and the 5D world, which we know exists, how do you reconcile all of that? Because the reason why I laugh about all of this is because holy shit, we got fooled.
Yep.
You know, we got pranked, literally. But how do you
listen? For me, I think we do what we do. For me, I personally try not to pick battles that will destroy me, and I've certainly shifted going towards a more pro-human approach with my destiny, as opposed to a more personal and selfish approach. So I feel I have to translate this information for people who are interested and give them more answers, more options. And, you know, if that karma comes back to me, fantastic. If it doesn't, let's see what happens. But where I am right now, this feels good to be doing this type of stuff for me.
Great. Okay, I think we're going to go. Thanks, Cameron. We're going to go back to another Zoom question. Just before that, on that note, when Andrea, you asked about Chinese and Japanese and German, other languages. I can tell you that in the case of Japan, it was from about 1868 with what they call the Meiji Restoration, when the colonial powers started coming in. That's when a lot of new jargon, legal jargon, was created. That a lot of people, young Japanese, take it for granted. They think it's been around for a long time. In fact, it was all created specifically because of
for deception.
Because of the legal system coming in from overseas.
Good answer, Patrick. Thank you.
I'm sorry, this was not a question from Zoom. It was a question from me.
Yeah.
And if anybody has got a question from Zoom, I'm sorry, I logged out of the call. I can't see them. They may be visible on Dennis's screen if he goes to participants. But if alternatively, please ask them again.
At the moment, no chat from what I can see.
Okay, but my question is, when you defend yourself using this type of language, you must assume that the people that you are defending yourself against can recognize this.
So again, we've got to be careful with questions or comments because they have a premise behind them. And one of the first things that I would observe would be that the opposite of defense might be attack. So I would rephrase the whole question totally by saying that absolutely everything is an offer. And if you can identify the offer, you can see what you want to do about it. Okay? So you can rebut it. That's risky because you risk being in dishonor, or you can accept it with conditions. This is where the strength lies. So if I wouldn't defend myself against what might be an attack. I would say to you, listen, I agree, do what you will, but I'll need some compensation now. If it was something trivial, I might say 5,000, or if it was something life-threatening, I might think, what's my life worth? Listen, let's make that 500 million, please.
Sure, but
and then you, if you refuse my offer, now I've thrown it back to you, and you're in very, very uncertain territory because I've now turned tables.
That may be correct legally.
Yeah.
But to get the enforcement of that legally may be much more difficult because it involves people in that system who understand the concepts that you are giving to them, that you're addressing them with.
Well, interestingly, and I've covered that with Roma, it was great just having him as a bit of a mentor personally, but he's had situations where the magistrate has said, I resign. They've had to fly magistrates up from Sydney to deal with him. And because he just works on the basics so well, he's put them in untenable positions. So, and I can give you many examples of that as well. It's just endlessly fascinating, these chats I've had with him.
So what you're saying is that this this
paradigm, I guess.
paradigm
Yeah.
is fully understood by the senior members of the legal position industry.
I wouldn't say that. I'd say it's partly understood by some and much more fully understood by others. And there would only be a handful of people in the world that could probably keep up with where Romley has gone with this. Because they've been sitting in this unquestioned power for so long. There's no correct. And they've been sitting on us, but nobody's challenged them to the extent that Rom has. And other people, by the way, there's a few people in Canada, England, they're all over the world. So it's not just Rom, but he's usually hurled it as one of the main figures who cracked a lot of really important things.
I've got loads more questions, but later.
Yeah. So don't forget, guys, we have the socializing part in the front. So yeah, anyone else in the room with a question? Specific question? Eamon?
Eamon worries me.
No, Dennis, that was extraordinary. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's so important because I think people's belief in the current justice system is just about non-existent now. So some understanding of an alternative, I think that's going to be increasingly important. And well done. You could have run down rabbit holes and 1,000 different ways there. So well done for keeping that on track, making it understandable. But you're a member of this group in Cairns. That's tremendous. Everybody's on board with this.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
sorry. Okay.
There was yeah.
So not necessarily, not quite. So I guess.
Well, I've got sort of something.
I guess I'll try to explain it, and it's a little bit non-tangible. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess what you could say, it's almost like being in a church, and your extent of belief between everybody listening to the themes varies. Some people are very closely aligned to what I think. Other people are very far away from what I think. And we've had lots of different speakers there. So some people align themselves more with, as I said, some of those people I showed at the beginning of the screen. Because I've had the honor and the pleasure, the privilege to sit in front of Rom and pick his brains directly, know where he's coming from, and I've seen the results of what he does.
I'm just making the point here that I can see that this could be glorious if enough people had a simple focus about challenging their mortgage.
That's the problem. Exactly.
Just a simple one and understood the process.
Yes.
That challenge to the system could really be a pain in the ass.
Absolutely. And that's there's a few groups in there's a group in the name's gone for me. It's down South Australia, and they are challenging all their rates. My Place, it's called Frankston in Australia. There's other groups in different places in Mariupol. Not what was it? There's some big walkout of the council in America just recently using these principles. I sent you the video back to that link you sent me. She's talking about exactly what I'm talking about. Her spin on it was a little bit different, but nonetheless, it's effective. So that's why I said I use the umbrella of common law loosely, because that subjectivity you have to apply to yourself and what motivates you. There's an individual perspective that will align with your value and your soul and your strategy.
Yeah, that's great, Dennis. Thank you. And again, my compliments. That was great. Very important too. Thank you.
Great. Is it Maricopa County in the US?
Yes, that's right.
Where they told all the council members to resign.
Her language
unless
was
they
exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Very clever language.
Okay, so I'd like to round this up. Yes, okay, so let's finish this off, shall we? Shall we give Dennis another hand? Massive hand. Thank you so much. That was excellent.
I'm honored to do it. Thank you guys so much for listening and to engage with me. I'm privileged to be here.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to our Zoomers who stayed on so late. Normally we don't go on this long, but they've all managed to be riveted to the screen to listen to this talk. So again, thank you. And now thank you, everybody. We'll round it up here for the first half, and we just make our way to the front and socialize. And if you have any more questions, feel free to pick Dennis's brain.
What's left of it?
Conditions and terms. Okay, thank you, guys. Give Dennis a big hand again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone on Zoom, for tuning in. Thank you, MJ and Marianne, Pat Cornwell, and Charles. And we got Janet in Japan.
Wow.
Quite a few people.
Great.
Australia, Japan. Thank you guys and cheers.
Pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure.